So without a doubt, it is the biggest domino in this coaching cycle, and that's Ben Johnson making his decision on Monday, just less than 48 hours after he lost in Detroit against the Commanders. And I was told that he was going to take some time on Sunday, think about what he wanted to do, think about which interviews he even wanted to take, because on the table for him, you had the Jacksonville Jaguars that he met with virtually, the Chicago Bears, he met with them virtually, and the Raiders. Tom Brady was on that Zoom when they spoke for 3 hours last Saturday. And Brady made a really strong case.
Not strong enough.
Not strong. I know. You very rarely hear Brady losing out.
He's 0 for 1 as an owner, which is crazy.
That's mean. But look, Brady tried to sell it as, I have the influence now. Tom Brady, right? I know how to win. I know what it takes. The type of program I'm going to install here. The Raiders of old is gone. This is going to be the new Las Vegas Raiders. And Brady really liked what Ben Johnson was about in terms of his analytics, but his game planning, his relationships with his quarterbacks, really all the great things that we've been hearing about him for years. And Brady was bought in on that. So when the news came down, what was interesting about this is Ben Johnson had members of his staff put together, right? So he has been back channeling, having conversations. His agent's been putting together teams for him. And he's had variations of them. Okay? So if he was going to go to Vegas, he had some of these guys. If he was going to go to Jacksonville, here. And it's all very different in Chicago. So Dennis Allen is expected to be his defensive coordinator.
DA, let's go, man. Good for him.
Right? So when I saw DA's name, my first thought was, okay, first-time head coach bringing on a veteran. Smart.
Super smart. And I think with DA, because I was with him a few years, and I know him pretty well. The thing about DA, you can say what you want about him as a head coach, right? Probably not the best, obviously fired 2 separate places, but as a defensive mind who just calls defense, and we talk about this all the time, right? Some people are better to be coordinators, right? Like Steve Spagnuolo, for instance. Like, yeah, he got some interviews in this job and he's been named, but like he's really good as a defensive coordinator. The fact that he put not only one of the best defensive coordinators on the market on his squad, plus a 2-time head coach, it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, so full disclosure, we recorded the show before the news broke, and Chase and I were just talking out Ben's options, and we kept coming to this realization of, why would he go to Vegas? Why would he go to Jacksonville? It's Chicago. It's that simple. Like, I don't know why we had this moment of clarity, because I felt like we kind of understood. We just had this moment of like, Ben Johnson needs to go to Chicago and call it. But I had known that he had some questions about the setup there with Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles, just some curiosities of how that would work. The whole idea that he wanted full control and full power, that's definitely part of it. He was interested in bringing in people he knows, people he trusts. But in the end, though, he makes the decision to actually go to the organization where he's not getting all that, right? This wasn't about money.
No.
This wasn't about roster control and power play. This was about one thing, and that's Caleb Williams. This is the organization that's got the talented quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Because you compare it, Brady had a hard argument to make, right? I mean, without having a quarterback there.
And that's exactly what we were talking about when we pre-recorded the show, but then we had to start over because breaking news broke during our show. Episode 1, this is episode 2 of the Scoop. But no, I think that for me, and we both, it's sort of crazy because I'm thinking about the roster of the Raiders. And yeah, they got some players, right? Max Crosby. Then you just start really looking at 1 through 53 of the Raiders roster. I'm like, yeah, you got Brady, and he's promising all these things, but there's actually nothing there. And then you look at Jacksonville, I'm like, Trevor Lawrence, okay. Like, he's on a vet deal, making $53 million a year. The roster control there, Trent Baalke, I don't know what they're going to do. And I'm like, 1 through 53, I'm like, and I'm like, that's the Bears. Like, what are you thinking about? Like, I think he probably had a moment of clarity with this, we have a legitimate offense. They need 3 offensive linemen, right? And they probably need another skill position, tight end, other than Cole Kmet type guy, this F who can do it all in his offense. But the thing about Caleb Williams is that there's no doubt in my mind that he will be successful with Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, quarterback whisperer, top 5 offense in every single year coordinating. In fact, 1 or 2 a couple years in a row. And it's just crazy how this stuff works it out, because I want to ask you this, because I thought the first thing that came to mind and when all this news broke was he didn't have an in-person meeting. He had a Zoom meeting. And
well, remember,
no. That's crazy, though.
He wanted this Bears job last year. Okay, so remember, the Bears stuck with Matt Eberflus. They rolled it out, and we saw what, it is what it is. We know what happened there. So he's had his eyes on Chicago, and I do think with all the options on the table, and you're listening to so many different people, and there were a lot of people in his ear. Because I've talked to people who've talked to him too, and it's like everyone is just chatting with him and telling him what he should be doing, and he's open to guidance and thought. But I think for the Bears, okay, they've gone through this process of interviewing, almost a dozen candidates.
Yeah.
And while I know that they really liked Mike Vrabel, and I do think if Vrabel didn't take New England, they would have hired Mike Vrabel. I do. I think Ben Johnson was the home run for them as well. I think this is why I said that this whole coaching cycle was really about Vrabel and Johnson, and it was who was going to get them first.
Yeah.
And the timing, because that's what's interesting in all this too. Timing is important. You and I talk about this with players, with free agency.
Timing's everything.
If, obviously we know Ben Johnson had been coaching through this playoffs. He had the bye in the first round. It made it complicated for teams to jump in on him. It was all of that. Whereas, obviously, we knew that Vrabel was able to talk to Chicago right away because he didn't have a job.
Yeah.
What if that panned out? What if
100%.
Robert Kraft decided to stick with Gerard Mayo, right? So there's so many little moments, little things and decisions that could have affected it. But in the end, I think for the Bears, this is such a win.
It's a home run hire.
This is such a big day for Bears fans. And for Caleb Williams.
Yeah, well, it's one of the most important hires in the history of the franchise, to be honest with you, because they've been so down and out with all these different head coaches, all these different quarterbacks. They finally get the number 1 pick in Caleb Williams, which is supposed to be this generational guy. And yeah, he played well at times this year. Yeah, he struggled this year. But if you look at the continuity of the offense, there was just nothing there. It was like, okay, one game they're under center play action. The next game they're this college USC offense. There was no rhyme, reason, or like, when I'm a quarterback and when I know quarterbacks, I want to know the why on plays. Why are we doing this? Why are we getting under center? And I don't think that Caleb Williams had a grasp on the why. That's all that Caleb Williams will have a grasp on, is the why with Ben Johnson. That's how he works. I was with him in 2020 when he was a tight ends coach for the Detroit Lions. You could just tell. Super smart, really low ego, high analytical guy, really understands relationships well. Obviously will take a lot of what Dan Campbell does from the leader of men aspect and put his own twist on it as well, which I think
that was going to be
cool.
my question for you, because when you joke on the show all the time about the leader of men, while we mock it, we know what they mean, right? And they want these type of leaders to galvanize the locker room. Is he like that?
Yeah, so he's definitely on the not shy. Shy is the wrong word, but on the not timid either. I'm trying to find a word for it.
Calmer.
It's more
a little bit more laid back.
Yeah, a little bit more laid back, a little bit more calm. He's definitely not Dan Campbell biting kneecaps off, right? He is his own certain way. But I do think him being with Dan Campbell so long and just the type of head coach that Dan Campbell is, you better believe, and I truly believe he's going to take some of what Dan Campbell did and he's going to do it to him, and he's going to put his own spin on it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this was always about, like you said, Caleb Williams and getting an offensive mind. Like the number one thing, if I had to point to Caleb Williams' issues at times this past year, it was all about timing within the pocket, timing in the pass game, going through progressions. That is what needs to get fixed, and this hire fixes it.
Okay, so here's my big question for you. Do you think Caleb Williams texted Ben Johnson first, or Ben Johnson texted him and was like, "This is the real Ben Johnson"?
Oh,
That's
my
what
God.
I want to know.
Yeah,
like,
I would imagine
if I'm
Ben
Caleb,
Johnson
I'm not
saw
even
that.
writing back. I'm just not responding. I'm like, just call him, FaceTime me. That's what they should do. They should
I wonder if Ben Johnson texts him like, "I promise you this is a real me," and then FaceTime him like that guy did.
Yes.
Everyone's, we're talking about the prank that Caleb Williams.
For those of you who don't know, a random awesome Chicago Bear. I say awesome. I probably shouldn't promote it, but a Bears fan texted Caleb Williams and said he was Ben Johnson and that he got the job.
And then they FaceTimed.
Awesome.
He actually fell for the
Hey,
FaceTime.
that kid broke the story. That kid was on it. He deserves all the credit. I'm going to tweet at him later and say good job for him. So thanks for tuning into Scoop City. If you want to hear more, make sure you like and subscribe. We drop our new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.